silent expanse of the Middle Eastern sky, once a canvas of ancient stars, has been permanently scarred by the trails of ballistic fire. We are no longer watching a regional skirmish. We are witnessing the terrifying acceleration of a global confrontation. For 8 consecutive days, the rhythmic thunder of Operation Epic Fury has shaken the foundations of Tehran. The United States and Israel have launched a bombardment of unprecedented scale, claiming to have neutralized 80% of Iran's air defenses and struck over 3,000 targets. From the outside, it looks like a methodical dismantling of a rogue state. But beneath the smoke of burning oil refineries and the ruins of high-value command centers, a much darker reality is emerging, one that Washington is desperate to keep from the headlines. The narrative of a contained war shattered the moment 6 American service members were returned home in flag-draped coffins, killed in a precision drone strike on a makeshift facility in Kuwait. This was not just another casualty of war. It was a surgical hit that exposed a catastrophic intelligence failure. How did an Iranian drone, often dismissed as low-tech, find a hidden American unit with such lethal accuracy? The answer leads directly to the Kremlin. Intelligence reports now confirm that Russia has moved from the sidelines into the heart of the battlefield, providing Tehran with real-time targeting data harvested from Moscow's massive space-based surveillance apparatus. This is the dark move that changes everything. Russian satellites, the silent eyes in the orbit, are now tracking American warships and aircraft, feeding coordinates directly to Iranian launch units. For the first time, the United States is not just fighting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, it is fighting an Iranian fist guided by a Russian brain. The red line that once separated the world's superpowers from direct involvement in this theater has not just been crossed, it has been erased. Moscow is signaling that it is willing to let American soldiers bleed to protect its strategic partnership with Tehran, turning a regional decapitation strike into a proxy war of global proportions. While President Trump publicly demands unconditional surrender, a term not heard with such gravity since the end of the Second World War, the ground beneath his strategy is shifting. The masterstroke of killing Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was intended to break the regime's will. Instead, it has triggered a Mosaic Defense, a decentralized and chaotic retaliation that defies conventional military logic. Iran is no longer fighting as a unified state. It is lashing out as a wounded predator, and it is no longer fighting alone. With Russia providing the eyes and China reportedly preparing to provide the lifeblood of parts and financing, the Middle East has become the epicenter of a new world war. The question is no longer how this war ends, but whether anyone left has the power to stop the fire from consuming the entire planet. The wreckage in Kuwait was not just a collection of twisted metal. It was a crime scene that pointed to a profound shift in the technological balance of power. Among the debris, investigators recovered fragments of a guidance and navigation unit that did not originate from the factories of Isfahan. The circuitry bore the distinct signatures of Russian high-end electronic warfare and satellite link modules, specifically designed to bypass the sophisticated jamming blankets the United States uses to protect its forward-deployed troops. For years, the world believed that the primary threat to American forces was the sheer volume of Iranian missiles. Now, the terrifying reality is their newfound precision. This precision is bought and paid for with Russian technical expertise, a calculated move by Vladimir Putin to turn the Middle East into a graveyard for American prestige. While the Pentagon official reports list 10 soldiers killed, the whispers in the corridors of power suggest the toll on American operational capacity is far higher. The dark move by Moscow serves a dual purpose. First, it acts as a direct retaliation for Western support of Ukraine, transforming the sands of the Middle East into a second front where Russia can bleed the United States without firing a single shot from a Russian rifle. Second, it secures Russia's position as the indispensable power broker in the region. By providing Tehran with the eyes to see through the American digital fog, Moscow has effectively neutralized the primary advantage of the United States, its technological superiority. The red line of direct superpower confrontation is no longer a distant theoretical boundary. It is being crossed every time a Russian satellite feeds a target packet to an Iranian drone operator. The atmosphere in the White House is one of controlled fury and mounting desperation. President Trump's maximum pressure campaign has reached its logical, violent conclusion, but the expected collapse of the Iranian regime has not materialized. Instead, the killing of the supreme leader has acted as a catalyst for a more radical, more decentralized, and more dangerous form of resistance. The Iranian military structure has shifted into a Hydra state cut off the head, and 10 more autonomous cells emerge, each more unpredictable than the last. These cells are now operating with the silent backing of Russian intelligence, ensuring that every American movement is tracked, logged, and targeted. The shadow of the Kremlin now looms over every decision made in the Situation Room. Geopolitically, this intervention signals the birth of a formal axis of resistance that includes a nuclear-armed superpower. Moscow is no longer interested in diplomatic niceties or back-channel warnings. By enabling the strike that killed 10 American soldiers, Russia has sent a message that the era of uncontested American hegemony in the Middle East is over. The global economy is already recoiling from this realization. Oil prices are not just spiking, they are entering a realm of volatility that threatens to trigger a worldwide recession. But for the soldiers on the ground, the concerns are much more immediate. They are looking at the sky, knowing that the satellites passing overhead are no longer just tools of communication, but the very instruments of their potential destruction, directed by a master strategist in Moscow, who has decided that the cost of American blood is a price he is more than willing to pay. The escalation reached a fever pitch when the Pentagon confirmed that the number of American casualties had risen to 10, a figure that sent shockwaves through the American public and the global diplomatic community. But the real story wasn't just the number, it was the method. Intelligence analysts have now identified that the drones used in the Kuwait strike were equipped with advanced electronic countermeasure suites that are carbon copies of those found on Russian frontline hardware. This is no longer a case of Iran using its own indigenous technology. Moscow has opened its black box of military secrets, handing over high-grade components that allow Iranian weapons to ghost through American Aegis and Patriot defense envelopes. By doing so, Russia has effectively turned the Persian Gulf into a testing ground for a direct kinetic confrontation with the West. The Kremlin's rationale for this dangerous gamble is rooted in a cold, calculated strategy of global distraction. For every American battery destroyed in the Middle East, there is one less system available to defend Eastern Europe. Moscow is betting that by dragging the United States into a prolonged, bloody quagmire in Iran, it can break the back of NATO's resolve and force Washington to negotiate on Russian terms across all theaters of conflict. This dark move is a masterpiece of asymmetrical warfare. Russia provides the intelligence and the technology, while Iran provides the martyrs. The result is a meat grinder that consumes American resources and lives, while Vladimir Putin watches from the safety of the Kremlin, maintaining a thin veil of plausible deniability that is becoming more transparent by the hour. On the ground in Tehran, the Mosaic Defense has turned the city into a labyrinth of hidden traps and decentralized command nodes. Even with the supreme leader gone, the revolutionary fervor has been replaced by a professional, cold-blooded insurgency. Local commanders, now linked by Russian-provided secure communication bursts, are coordinating strikes that are timed to perfection. They are not fighting to win a conventional war. They are fighting to make the cost of American presence unsustainable. The streets that were once filled with protesters demanding change are now silent, occupied by specialized units of the IRGC who have traded their uniforms for civilian clothes, blending into the population to wait for the moment to strike. They are the ghosts in the machine, guided by Russian satellites that never sleep. The geopolitical red line has not just been blurred, it has been completely incinerated. The United States now faces a choice that will define the next century. Do they strike the Russian assets, providing this data, risk a direct nuclear exchange with Moscow, or do they continue to let their soldiers be picked off by an invisible hand? The masterstroke that was supposed to bring Iran to its knees has instead pulled back the curtain on a much larger and more terrifying alliance. As more flag-draped coffins arrive at Dover Air Force Base, the American public is beginning to realize that the war they were promised would be over in weeks is actually the opening chapter of a global struggle. The pieces on the board have shifted, and for the first time in decades, the United States is playing a game where the opponent knows their every move before they even make it. The strategic landscape shifted from a localized invasion to a global standoff when the Kremlin officially broke its silence. In a televised address that mirrored the cold intensity of the Soviet era, Moscow did not deny its involvement. Instead, it framed its actions as a necessary stabilization of a region pushed to the brink by Western aggression. Behind the rhetoric lies a terrifying new reality. Russia has deployed its most advanced S-400 and S-500 missile defense systems to the borders of Iran, creating a no-fly bubble that challenges American air supremacy for the first time in 30 years. This is not just about protecting an ally. It is about creating a sanctuary from which Iranian forces can launch retaliatory strikes against U.S. bases with absolute impunity. The death of the 10 American soldiers has ignited a political firestorm in Washington that threatens to tear the domestic fabric apart. While the administration points to the masterstroke of eliminating the Iranian leadership, the opposition points to the mounting body bags and the undeniable fact that the war is expanding, not ending. The public is beginning to ask, how did a campaign promised to be a surgical liberation turn into a direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed Russia? The intelligence community is under fire for failing to predict the depth of the Moscow-Tehran alliance. It is now clear that while the United States was planning for a conventional regime change, Russia was planning for a multi-domain war of attrition. On the high seas, the situation is even more precarious. The Strait of Hormuz, the world's most vital energy artery, has become a graveyard of sunken tankers and drifting mines. Russian naval assets are now conducting freedom of navigation exercises alongside the remnants of the Iranian Navy, effectively daring the U.S. Fifth Fleet to engage. This maritime shield allows Iran to continue its Mosaic Defense by sea, using swarms of explosive-laden fast boats that are now guided by Russian GLONASS satellite signals. The precision of these attacks has jumped tenfold. Every American carrier group in the region is now operating under a permanent state of high alert, knowing that a single successful hit could escalate this conflict into a full-scale world war. Economically, the dark move by Moscow is a masterclass in financial sabotage. By fueling the flames of the Middle East conflict, Russia has driven global oil prices to over $200 per barrel. This is a deliberate strike at the heart of the Western economy, designed to trigger hyperinflation and civil unrest in Europe and North America. As the cost of living soars, the political will to sustain a war against Iran and Russia simultaneously is eroding. Vladimir Putin is playing a long game, betting that the American voter will eventually value cheap gasoline over a distant war in the desert. The red line is gone, replaced by a complex web of geopolitical traps that Washington is finding impossible to navigate without shedding more American blood. The escalation has now reached a point of no return as the theater of war expands from the dusty plains of the Middle East to the sterile, high-stakes digital and orbital battlegrounds of the superpowers. Following the tragic loss of the 10 American soldiers, the Pentagon's internal assessment has reached a chilling conclusion. The United States is no longer fighting a counterinsurgency or a simple regime change war. They are engaged in a high-intensity proxy conflict where the rules of engagement are being rewritten by Moscow in real time. Russian intelligence ships, stationed strategically in the eastern Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea, have begun deploying sophisticated jamming arrays that have effectively blinded several American carrier-based early warning systems. This electronic shroud has created corridors of vulnerability, allowing Iranian-launched cruise missiles to bypass defenses that were previously thought to be impenetrable. In the heart of Washington, the rhetoric has shifted from triumphant declarations of a masterstroke to a somber preparation for a long-term struggle. The administration is facing an agonizing dilemma that could trigger a global catastrophe. Military advisors are reportedly presenting options for symmetric retaliation, a euphemism for striking the Russian intelligence assets that provided the targeting data for the Kuwait strike. However, the risks are astronomical. Striking a Russian asset, even one actively assisting an enemy, could be interpreted by Moscow as an act of direct war, potentially triggering the dead hand protocols of Russia's nuclear doctrine. The red line has become a tripwire for Armageddon, and every move the United States makes is being countered by a Russian move designed to provoke a mistake. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Iran has spiraled into a nightmare that Moscow is expertly exploiting for propaganda. As the Mosaic Defense draws American strikes deeper into urban centers like Isfahan and Shiraz, the civilian death toll is mounting. Russian state media is flooding the global south with high-definition footage of the destruction, painting the United States as a reckless aggressor and itself as the protector of sovereignty. This information warfare campaign is successfully peeling away America's traditional allies in the region. Countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, sensing a shift in the global order, are beginning to hedge their bets, refusing to allow their airspace to be used for further American sorties. The diplomatic isolation of Washington is becoming a tangible reality, crafted with surgical precision by the Kremlin's diplomatic corps. At the center of this storm lies the dark move involving the transfer of advanced Russian hypersonic technology to the remnants of the IRGC. Reports are surfacing that a small number of Zircon missile components have been smuggled into Iranian territory under the guise of humanitarian aid. If Iran manages to field even a single hypersonic battery with Russian guidance, the entire American naval presence in the Persian Gulf will become obsolete overnight. These weapons move at speeds that render current missile defenses useless. The 10 soldiers killed in Kuwait may have been the first victims of this new era of warfare, but without a radical shift in strategy, they will certainly not be the last. The world is watching a slow-motion collision between two nuclear titans, with the ruins of Iran serving as the tragic stage for their opening act. The geopolitical chessboard has been kicked over, and in the resulting chaos, the specter of a total global realignment is taking shape. The death of the 10 American soldiers has forced Washington into a corner where every available exit leads to further escalation. The White House now faces the ultimate red line paradox. To withdraw or scale back in the face of Russian-backed Iranian resistance would be a signal of terminal decline for American superpower status. Yet to push forward is to risk a direct kinetic war with Moscow that no one can truly win. Information from the front lines suggests that the dark move was never just about a few satellite coordinates. It was a psychological operation designed to prove that American technology can be countered, American soldiers can be killed with precision, and American political will can be broken by the cold reality of a body count. As the smoke clears from the latest round of strikes, a new tripartite alliance is emerging between Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing. While Russia provides the kinetic and orbital eyes, China has begun to move its massive economic weight behind the scenes, ensuring that the Iranian economy does not collapse despite the most draconian sanctions in history. This triple entente of the 21st century is using the conflict in Iran to drain the United States of its remaining military reserves and financial capital. The 10 lives lost in Kuwait are now being used as a rallying cry across the East, framed as the beginning of the end for the unipolar moment. The narrative has shifted from a war for democracy to a war for the survival of the Western-led international order itself. Inside the United States, the silence of the fallen is being drowned out by the noise of a nation at war with itself. The masterstroke of the early invasion is now viewed through the lens of a strategic trap. Protests are erupting in major cities, fueled by the realization that the surgical strike has metastasized into a global confrontation. The families of the 10 soldiers are demanding answers that the Pentagon cannot give without admitting that they are fighting a war against two enemies at once, one visible on the ground and one invisible in the stars. The strategic ambiguity that once allowed for diplomacy has evaporated, leaving behind a raw, unfiltered struggle for dominance that ignores all previous international norms. The final question remains: is the red line gone? The answer is a terrifying yes. It has been replaced by a gray zone of permanent conflict, where the boundaries between peace, proxy war, and total war have ceased to exist. Moscow's involvement has guaranteed that the fall of Tehran will not be the end of the story, but rather the opening of a much larger and more dangerous chapter in human history. As the world teeters on the edge of the abyss, the only certainty is that the cost of this war will be measured not just in the lives of soldiers, but in the total transformation of the global power structure. The fire that started in the bunkers of Tehran has now reached the halls of the Kremlin and the streets of Washington, and it shows no signs of being extinguished.